Welcome everybody. I'm going to moderate the call today. My name is Flo. Most of you know me already. It's great to see some new faces as well. I'm from Lim Labs and Perdia and part of the people that started this initiative end of last year. Today we've got a few things planned. There is a quick interlude in the beginning from David, who will be speaking about one of the initiatives that MakerDAO are busy with right now that might interest some of you guys. I'm going to give a very brief update on the remote meetups and how that experiment is going, which we started in the last call, just to give an update. And then we have two speakers. We have James Zaki, who is just going to report back on the Super Meetup that happened in Asia recently, and just some of the exciting things that came out from there. And after that, we'll hand over to Adam, who's part of the core marketing team at Consensys, and he'll be speaking about the BUIDL Network and the initiative that, that they have going on there. So just before I hand over to you, David, maybe just a quick update from my side on the experiments. So just as a reminder, I'm going to share my screen here quickly. Cool. I think, are you guys able to see my Google Chrome window?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, so last time, just for context, we started an experiment with remote presentations and remote speakers, and the idea behind this was to bring people together, so local meetups with remote presenters, and see if we can get a bit of connectedness going. So we just started experimenting with this, and there actually are some events that are on this list already, so I just wanted to run through this. And the one that we are planning, so there's like a dual workshop on crypto economics, which is happening on the 2nd and the 9th of April, actually has gathered a lot of momentum, which is really cool. I think I have this open here somewhere. Let me just see. Yeah, I also have it open here. So there's a sign-up form for meetups who want to participate remotely. And then there also is a sign-up form for anyone who wants to tune in individually. But basically the idea of this thing is to experiment with a remote presentation and then to create local meetup events around this. And we've got a bunch of meetups that are now participating. So Token Engineering Cape Town, then we have Sofia, Istanbul, Berlin, Vienna, Cape Town, Joburg, Copenhagen. All of these meetups will actually create local events around this remote presentation. And then we have breakout sessions planned where there was groups of people from all over the place will come together and discuss just the topics at hand here. So yeah, if anybody wants to be part of that, just ping us afterwards. We'll also send this information through again. And it's definitely going to be a good one. And I hope it's going to be one of many to follow. And hopefully also this will, or the success of this will bring about some momentum with other people starting to experiment with these remote presentations as well. Yeah, so we'll just share this information at the end of the call in the Telegram group again. And that's all I really wanted to say there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, David. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Florian. Hey, how's it going, everybody? So I haven't met all of you, but my name is David. I do community development at MakerDAO. And in the background for the last month or two, we've been hacking away at this really cool initiative that we've been dark launching. So without further ado, I'm going to share in the chat just a link to this this resource. It's called the Do-It-Yourself Meetups Kit. So it's meant to be like a general resource really for any kind of meetup, but baked into it, there's a lot of guidelines on how to host like a specifically MakerDAO related meetup. And also we, with this resource, are launching a microgrants program. So if I know Ethereum overlaps a lot with people that are fascinated with DeFi, and at Maker, we're really hoping to kind of push grassroots, meetups forward, and we want to support them. So if you or any of your, friends, associates, anybody you'd like, they could check out this resource, and they could apply for a microgrant. It's super simple. All you have to do is fill out an Airtable form. I think it's like 18 or 19 questions. You give us the request network link up front, and we fund you in DAI if everything is good. And then if you want future funding, the only requirement is that you fill out a feedback form, which is also all there in the resource. So, in the spirit of Maker and in the spirit of like the DAO and the community, we also are hosting this on GitHub. So if anybody has any feedback or suggestions or additions, feel free to submit a pull request. We would love that. And so, yeah, that's all I really wanted to share with you guys. So much respect to all of you guys hosting Ethereum meetups. I love it, and I hope that we could all collectively push this space forward.
Also, I don't want to interrupt you so much, but I got 2 grants from Maker and especially from David.
Yes.
So if anyone has any questions or how to like fill out the form or anything like how it goes behind the scenes, or if you want to talk to someone who already got those, I'm there for you. And actually, I'm gonna have a call with some people that are going to have those meetups as well. So I share with them some of my slides and so on. Yeah, so I did 2 meetups already.
Yeah, so actually, can I just add to that? So Annette was one of our initial grantees, and she did a great job. Also, part of the resource in the actual GitHub repository, there's a folder for previously used slide decks that have been stripped down. So if you guys need Maker slides, I think there's like 7 or 8 different formerly used presentations that you could pick up and use. We got permission from all the people that put them together. So yeah, that's all. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David. If anyone has any questions for David, feel free to ping him afterwards or to send through some questions in the chat. And if we have time towards the end, we can also address those still. And yeah, this goes for the other 2 presentations as well. So just throw any questions you have in the chat, or also use the raise hand functionality, or if the room is quite quiet, just feel free to speak yourself as well after the presentations. Cool. So James, over to you. I'm excited to hear about the Super Meetup.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Is my sound still working okay?
Your mic is a bit shady there.
Okay. That's it. Okay, what about now?
Still bad. I remember last time we were on a call, I think you just unplugged your earphones and that worked.
No, we can't hear you.
Let's just give James another 10 seconds or so to sort it out. Otherwise, I would maybe suggest, Adam, if you're ready, we start with your thoughts and just presenting the BUIDL network while James is trying to sort out his mic.
All right. This should be working now.
Cool. You got it, yeah. So James, you're on. Awesome.
Yeah. I even had backup headphones. It might be this Mac now, which is a shame. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, the Ethereum Super Meetup was a couple of weeks ago now, and that was off the back of, in the middle of Token 2049. And at Token 2049, they had a whole bunch of speakers, basically mostly speakers set up. But the Super Meetup was something that Vitalik was keen to participate in because it was open and accessible. People could just turn up, basically. They had the main stage of Token 2049, and it was free to attend. So that was really good, whereas the main event cost a fair bit to attend. I'm just going to pull this over, and you might have to forgive the airplane noise in the background as well. That will be happening. Okay, so yeah, basically in the Super Meetup we had, I'm just going to mute while that goes past. It's just, yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, the Super Meetup had representatives from different countries, and we had mostly around Asia, Hong Kong, Manila, Japan, Korea, and yeah, so I got a chance to chat with all of those different meetup organizers, and basically the presentations were to follow a few different points around community, but also equally touch upon business investment into the country / regulation, like just looking at the regulatory environment to see how easy it is, maybe people from other countries who want to do something in that country, and also around education, and then at the end we touch upon future events. So obviously for this group, the interesting parts are around community and also education. And it was good to see that even with cities that are like, basically most cities had kind of very similar topics covered, like very similar types of events that are being run. So everyone does the presentation style events. Everyone sort of looks upon workshops as well. So they're the 2 sort of key formats that are run. Something interesting came up around languages. So in countries where you might have other spoken languages in the vicinity, like say in Sydney, there's a high proportion of Chinese speakers. So there was the suggestion that in those kind of scenarios to also have sort of breakout groups that allow these communities to speak in their native language. So like oftentimes whenever you're organizing a meetup, it's going to be in either in the native language or English, but there sometimes are perhaps subgroups that are more comfortable in another language. So that was an interesting suggestion and relevant to Sydney. I'm not sure how relevant for other countries, whether in South Africa it's both Afrikaans and English, or I'm not sure what.
13 official languages.
Oh, there you go. So yeah, there may be like a high proportion group that will want to have their own native tongue just to be more communicative and expressive, because when it is a new complex topic, it can be quite challenging. So there actually isn't too much more exciting on that topic. We just sort of all reported what our communities were doing. And I guess for myself, I kind of just sit between a few communities. That there's like a tech-focused community, there's a presentation-focused community, and then there's another business kind of based community. But equally, there are three different communities, and then other more blockchain, rather than Ethereum-based, they're more blockchain-based ones as well. And just to be able to touch upon each of those was, I guess, a nice thing to be able to do, rather than have me just running one community and there being others that I don't mention. It was just touching upon all those that exist. I actually don't have too much more. Like, are there any questions so far?
I've just got one question. Was there any conversation around the Ethereum Foundation creating a stronger link of communication between meetup organizers and them? Was that also there, or was that somewhere else?
That point is familiar to me, but I'm not sure where that was. If that was at the Super Meetup, or was that more generally? We've heard that before. Yeah, there are different groups like the Foundation and others doing some outreach. I think perhaps the Foundation was more on maybe work, but yeah, I know there's other companies like I think Consensys who reach out to communities and sort of wish to bring people together under one umbrella. But yeah, I don't recall specifics about that yet. But yeah, I think it's actually going to be brief on the Super Meetup. Yeah, it was in Hong Kong, Token 2049, and yeah, the Super Meetup was just good to be able to have that point that Vitalik made by presenting at the Super Meetup and not at the conference was interesting. Just to say, yep, we want to support more inclusive things. And if I'm to touch upon, say, EdCon in Sydney, that's in a couple of weeks from now, I think. That's also initially come across as quite sort of conferencey and quite, lots of advertisement to buy tickets and whatnot. Whereas some others in the community are looking to build more of a grassroots event around that as well, such that people can perhaps attend for free other events, and if they can't afford to attend EdCon. But I'm also in discussions with EdCon to see where they can have more community engagement with some things, and they've got something in mind there. So we'll have more information on that next week, hopefully, as well. So I guess in summary, yeah, that combination of sort of standard conference paid event and to have some opening for community engagement at sort of zero entry barrier is something to be mindful of, especially with communities that volunteer their time anyway, which I'm guessing most of you do.
Super. So it doesn't look like there are any other questions.
I have a final question.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe I missed this first part, but what do you feel for those kind of meta events? I guess they are most appropriate for having lectures. So how did you feel about the engagement online? So asking questions or let's stay in focus or whatever?
Yeah, I don't recall any specific teachers mentioning that, any specific community organizers mentioning that format, but it's definitely something we've spoken about here before, and I guess it's yeah, generally speaking, that's a good thing. If I've understood the question correctly, it's sort of how does it work for people dialing into a presentation?
Yeah, so is it, I guess it's most appropriate for presentations, so that yeah, somebody's presenting something, not that much of a raising a discussion or things like that. Or did you try any interactive element?
Yeah, so I guess speaking, with my experience of things that I've run in Sydney, we've done the kind of more of a workshop together where we're coding independently in two different cities, and we've dialed in. And at the beginning, we'll have a conversation, introduce what we're doing. At the end, we might do the same. And in the middle, just sort of as a checkpoint to see how we're going. So we just sort of, in that format, we'll touch base. But I guess the more traditional format for remote dial-in is the presentation format. So those seem to work much like watching a YouTube video. And in terms of questions, I know we've spoken about different tools that are possible for that. And perhaps we can find the links from other sessions about that. But one is, actually, I can't even remember the tool now. But yeah, there are tools that allow people to sort of post their questions. So as a moderator, you can have a list of questions appearing that get upvoted, and then you can answer those.
I think I've seen something like that on YouTube, but I also don't remember. But
like Slido,
you know it?
Like Slido.
Okay, take it down. Thanks.
SLI.D.
Okay, cool. Great, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Angela. Any other questions? Super. I'm going to hand it over to Adam. So Adam is, like I said earlier, part of the core marketing team at Consensys. And he's been championing this BUIDL Network initiative that they have been running for a little while now. And essentially, he'll be talking to you guys about that. And yeah, you'll be able to figure out if it's something for you. Cool.
Cool. Thank you, Florin. Florin, I'm saying it right.
Florian, yeah. No worries.
Sorry, it's a much nicer sounding name than Adam. Adam sounds so like you're throwing up a little bit. Ripping on my own name. I blame my parents for that, not for me. Yeah, so thanks for having me, guys. I'm glad I found this kind of Ethereum meetup community. I don't even remember how I found you guys. There's so many like Telegram channels and WhatsApp groups and Discord channels and meetups, and I lose track of how I kind of get in touch with folks, but I'm definitely glad I found you guys, because I think it's super helpful just at a like baseline, how do we put on good events? You know, like I feel like that's kind of the core of this community group. So I'm glad this is kind of going. But yeah, very quickly, my name is Adam. I've been at Consensys since September of 2017, right before all the craziness. I mean, I think the whole industry has been crazy since the beginning, probably, but since the crazy hype that kind of took over for a little while. And my role was kind of interesting. If you guys know anything about Consensys, it's very kind of self-organized and self-managed. So people realized internally, like, hey, we need someone to help with kind of community, like in quotations. And so like, let's bring on some community folks. And once I was hired, I was maybe the 5th marketing team hire at Consensys and the 2nd community team hire. It was like, oh, hey, welcome aboard. Help out with community, go. There wasn't like too much direction, which is very Consensys-y, but I kind of enjoyed it. I like that kind of startup-y vibe where you kind of have to build up your own thing. And one of the first things I started building on was just here in New York. I'm based in Brooklyn. I've been doing kind of community work for almost a decade. From I was on a couple different teams at Google. I was on a team at Wix. I'm still a big Wix fan. So if you guys like to build quick websites, I'm your guy. And yeah, so I kind of decided, I was like, well, let's focus here on New York, on Brooklyn. Let's kind of start getting community organized here. But as the company grew and as we kind of went into that crazy growth mode, from when I started, there was 200 people at Consensys, and at the height we had maybe 1,300 people. So all within a year. So in that crazy kind of growth period, there was, you know, a lot of different kind of opportunities and things to figure out. And I was thinking about New York, but New York was kind of self-sustaining in a way. There's already a pretty established community here. Michael Werler, who is the founder of Infura, he started a meetup group called, I believe it's just NYC Ethereum, which I think is the second or third biggest Ethereum specific meetup in the meetup platform. So we were kind of had an established presence here through Michael and his efforts. So I kind of shifted my focus into figuring out, like, how could we support communities where Consensys may never have an office, Consensys may never have any representation, like someone that we hire or what have you, and kind of aligning with office growth. So we started talking about opening an office in Israel and in London and in Sydney, and figuring out ways that we can kind of start a community movement in those cities where we're going to have offices, and how do we support communities where we maybe go for a large scale event like South by Southwest, for example, or Davos, or East Denver. All of these kind of things that are happening, how do we kind of get involved, and how do we kind of leave a lasting impact? So that's when I kind of came up with this whole notion of like starting this kind of global interconnected meetup community. And I'm titling it aptly the BUIDL Network. And really all the BUIDL Network is a series of interconnected meetup groups that allow each other kind of to support one another, to do knowledge sharing, and to plug into what we're doing here at Consensys. And it allows Consensys to plug in to what folks are doing in different parts of the world. We have meetup groups in Boise, Idaho, in Istanbul, and in bigger cities too, of course, in Sydney. Initially it started out where it was just Consensys members. Like, we have so many people at Consensys that have just launched meetup groups in parts of the world that they want to be or want to live. Consensys has a remote first culture, so people can work anywhere they want. They don't have to be in any given city. So initially it was just kind of like putting all these folks into like a meetup hub where we could actually figure out ways to support their events they're hosting, figure out ways to send swag to them, covering their meetup fees, you know, just the kind of nuts and bolts of just kind of being a part of this community, like figuring out ways that Consensys can, you know, at a very minimum level, like support what meetup organizers were doing. And then that would allow us to gain access to what they're doing in their markets. So from figuring out ways to connect with universities through these event organizers, figuring out ways to connect with local businesses or enterprises, all while supporting what they're doing, and then figuring out ways that those event organizers can plug into what we're doing, whether it's financial backing for potential projects, whether it's looking for content for their meetups, like speakers presenting in person or in a webinar. Just really looking for like kind of like a symbiotic relationship between all the cool things that Consensys is working on and all the cool things that the network is working on. And it's been pretty successful so far. We have, I believe, around 37,000 like total members that are a part of like the BUIDL Network Hub. I think there's about 49 what I call BUIDL ambassadors, which are basically event organizers that are actively putting on Ethereum or blockchain specific meetups. And that's kind of where things are at. And I think usually the first two questions that people ask are like, okay, so what are the things that Consensys helps me with when I kind of join the network? Because the first thing everyone asks for is like, hey, can they pay for budget for catering and for event venues? And for, I had somebody ask for gas to get to a different city for like a project. And sadly, I don't have budget for that. I wish I did. Maybe someday, that'd be great. But right now, at a very minimum level, we cover like meetup fees. We send swag. We add people to a Telegram group and a Discord channel, which we just launched. But I think the real like benefit from it is two things. One is figuring out ways that these community organizers can connect, kind of similar to what you guys have created with kind of the ETH Meetup Telegram channel and kind of what you're doing through Zooms here. So figuring out ways to kind of like spur innovation between meetup organizers to develop projects, to develop support systems, better communications channels. So like kind of being like the, I guess you could say the catalyst for kind of this kind of global movement. That I think is going to be the most important thing. But I think there's going to be a lot of things that the network itself will kind of bubble up to the top. Like I'm looking for cool things like an incentives that Consensys can do for the network. Two quick examples is I've started like an affiliates program. So Consensys has a group called Academy, which is basically online developer training, well, online and offline developer training. So people can actually develop their first smart contract. We have a boot camp that is offline. And then we have an online, like on-demand developer course, like bootcamp, that'll teach people to build their first smart contract and kind of the core basics of Ethereum. So figuring out ways to kind of discount that for members, and then through that, actually turn event organizers into essentially resellers. So it's like, hey, we're part of the BUIDL network. If you want to learn about Solidity, you can take this class. And then if anybody signs up that's a part of the member network, they would get like a small cut. So it's kind of like looking for like opportunities like that, like symbiotic relationships that make sense. One other thing that I'm just starting to kind of get the ball rolling on is funding, potential funding through Consensys. So if you guys are familiar with Consensys Labs or Tachyon, it's called, and we also have capital management, which is something that I'm not a part of. That's a little bit too Wall Street for me. But these are all kind of things that are part of Consensys. Looking for ways to plug in to projects that are beneficial to the Ethereum ecosystem. Very similar, I'm guessing, to what you do, David, over at MakerDAO with the kind of micro grants, looking for ways to kind of support projects that are beneficial to the overarching ecosystem. So what I want to do is actually create like a pitch week where the entire BUIDL network can actually put in applications. We'll have our tech team, like developers and maybe some founders, look through, review applications, see which ones like make sense, and then set up like a Zoom call for a pitch week where they can actually pitch our labs team for potential funding, all leading to like a final pitch, like being in person, for what I'm calling the BUIDL Network Summit, which I'm probably going to align it with Ethereal, which is Consensys' kind of flagship conference. I think we're going to be doing one this fall somewhere in Europe, so stay tuned for that. Probably aligning it alongside of that, where we'll get the entire network together, we'll have them meet one another, we'll have folks from all the different projects internally at Consensys hopefully be there. I say hopefully because, you know, everyone has a lot of stuff going on. I've been slowly chatting with Joe Lubin and his kind of alignment team to see if I can get him there for like meet and greets and presentations and keynote addresses. And then also having the finalists from this labs kind of pitch week pitch the labs team and see if we can actually fund them. So really at the core of all this is that like figuring out ways that we can kind of connect these kind of potentially siloed communities that have been, you know, haven't had much support, and figuring out ways that Consensys can kind of support them as the community grows and as the network grows. The process is pretty straightforward. I'll do a quick screen share for anyone that's like interested in learning more. I created a handy dandy website where people can kind of come and see what the BUIDL network is all about. Basically, they'll go here. It'll give a quick description of BUIDL because I realize not everyone in the world knows the term BUIDL. So working with a few different folks that have a lot of insight into the kind of the community and the network, I came up with a rough definition of BUIDL. But I'm always open to feedback. So if you guys feel like this is way off base of what you think the word BUIDL means, I'm happy to do some adjusting. So it kind of talks about BUIDL. It talks about what the network is. Just a series of, you know, like I said, a series of meetup groups that are all around the world with a lot of different kind of fun things that are happening inside of them. The BUIDL Ambassador Program, which is basically the event organizers that are actively putting on meetups, figuring out ways to support them. And then if people want to apply, you just click the apply button and it goes to a form. And people here will review it. We'll make sure, and what I want to do is initially it was just me reviewing, but what I want to start to do is like opening up this review process to what I'm calling the BUIDL Ambassador Committee. Basically, it's people that have raised their hand and said they want to get more involved in kind of like policy and regulation around the network. So it's not just me, this overarching Consensys overlord, kind of pulling the strings of the network. Like I don't want that. I want it to be kind of a group effort. So we'll work through vetting. We'll make sure that there's no hatred or vitriol on people's Twitter accounts. We'll make sure that if they have LinkedIn pages, they're solid, GitHub. Make sure all these things kind of check out, and then we'll add them to the network. And yeah, and then I guess this is kind of the hub. This is what it looks like right now. It's just through the Meetup platform. Right now, there's, as I said, about 37,000 groups or members in about 48 groups in 23 countries. And yeah, you can see all the different kind of upcoming events through the, if you go to BUIDLnetwork.net, this will lead to this, and you can kind of see all the fun things that are coming up inside of the BUIDL network. I'm trying to think. I think that's about it. What questions do you guys have?
Awesome. I'm sure there will be questions.
Oh, Adam, actually, this is so cool, and I love your idea. And if you need any help with it, I'm there, open up for you to help you.
Awesome.
So
I'll put my Twitter and my email address in the chat. You guys can message me, or Telegram. I'm on Telegram too, so.
Yeah, Telegram would be the best for me because I hate all that kind of email and shitty stuff. Sorry about that.
I could jump in. I guess the question, I guess you probably hear a bit around something like in the decentralized space, starting from crypto anarchy, and then Consensys comes in and say, hey, we want to help build it. And yeah, it's going to be a mildly critical question, but it's just sort of more so to cover the base. Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned sort of that there's swag. I presume that's sort of Consensys branding and marketing, where there are things where Consensys helps the community. Presumably then there's a requirement of putting up Consensys logos, maybe having a moment to talk about Consensys at them. So you did mention that it is, I guess, mutually beneficial, such that obviously the community benefits from what Consensys can offer, but on the flip side, they also have to sort of pay back in some form. I guess maybe a general question around that, but also touching upon, I didn't catch the name, is it Capion? You mentioned as part of Consensys is to Wall Street. I'm not sure what you were referring to there.
Sorry, I don't know if I'd label it technically Wall Street, but basically there's all these kind of projects and programs inside of Consensys, some of which are called spokes, which are basically potential companies that would spin off and become their own organizations. Like examples of that are like Grid Plus, I think, is one of them. Truffle, I think, is on its way to becoming something like that. There's a handful of other ones that are kind of part of Consensys, but inside of that there's like Consensys Ventures, which is kind of like the venture capital fund. So like if you become a spoke, you get invested in by Consensys Labs. Consensys Labs is kind of like the auditing and vetting team and business relations team, and making sure, like you like Shark Tank. Like imagine going to Shark Tank. It's similar vibe. And capital management, which I'm total transparency. I don't really connect with that team too often. From my understanding, is basically focused on managing assets, whether it's like crypto assets or real estate assets, stuff like that could potentially like tokenize or something. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not too familiar with what that team does.
No worries. So on that, I'm just sort of tying in the point that that's all under the same Consensys umbrella, all the same. And you also touched upon that you're chatting with Joe Lubin's alignment team. And that to me, again, sounds like as a corporation should have some consistency and alignment, even though there is independent spokes, there still has to be some vetting. And finally, I sort of obviously cherry-picked the things around that sort of cognitive dissonance, if you will, between a corporation and community. The Consensys isn't going to necessarily have overarching control, but on the other hand, there's still a vetting process. But like with every, I guess, new thing that is trying to onboard community, it starts off being very, I forget the graph, but it starts off being very much adding a value. Then after that, it starts extracting value. So I guess for the individuals with very good intentions within Consensys, they're going to be doing great things for the communities. They're going to be onboarding the communities, and that's awesome. But at some point, there'll be a tipping point where Consensys will say, okay, great, now our ventures needs to grow and become very profitable. We're going to have to start extracting from these communities. Touching upon all of those, just to frame that question around, do you have any concerns that in the future, the communities that you've built are going to be, Consensys will flick the switch to extraction?
So not really, and I'll say the biggest reason why is anyone that becomes part of the community can leave it anytime they want. I'm not like, it's not like you're signing a legal document saying like, you are from now on owned by Joe Lubin and Vitalik Buterin, and this is your life now. Sign your name in blood. And I totally get what you're saying. Like, I think there's the old adage, like, all good things or all good notions start as a good idea, and then they become a business, and then they become a racket. Like, it's kind of like that thing you were mentioning. Right now, it's definitely not at that point. It's just me. So we haven't had anyone that's wanted to leave the network. We haven't had anyone that's been like super concerned about like that kind of extracting value from the network. I'm just trying to find like unique opportunities for people internally at Consensys, whether it's a project or a program or a spoke or ventures or whomever, to kind of like say, hey, there's this giant community of people that are doing really cool shit. How do you want to plug into it? And then vice versa, saying like, hey, we're Consensys. We have a bunch of cool shit going on here. Maybe there's some way that I can plug you into what we're doing here. And obviously it's not a perfect solution. I'm kind of like this weird middleman liaison between Consensys, the org, and like the BUIDL network. But that's why I'm trying to find ways to like harness the community itself to kind of self-organize it and self-maintain it. That's why I started this kind of like this BUIDL committee. And basically it's just the people, the organizers that are most engaged, where we're meeting daily, or not daily, right now it's tri-weekly. We're meeting tri-weekly on a Zoom call saying like, hey, here's the agenda items, very similar to what you guys are doing. Here's the agenda items. Let's talk about policies. Let's talk about regulations. Let's talk about opportunities. Let's talk about getting the Meetup network more involved with itself. So yeah, I hope that answers some of your question. The other question you had about like sponsorships, there's really only 2 requirements for being a part of the network. One is we want people to actually host a meetup. We want the people to host a meetup once a quarter. So basically 4 times a year. We feel like I host a meetup myself here in New York. I'm having one actually during Blockchain Week. You're all invited to. It's on our New York page right now. I still don't know the content. I was actually surprised. I put out a Slack message to the mesh, we call it, the Consensys folks. And I said, hey, we're going to host a meetup during Blockchain Week. Anybody interested? And usually people are like, oh, I'm busy, I can. And I had 8 different groups reach out to me like, hey, I want to be part of this. I'm like, sick. So I'm expecting a really good meetup, and it'll be here in the offices in Brooklyn if you're here for Blockchain Week. So definitely, hopefully you can stop by for that. But yeah, one requirement is just hosting 1 meetup per quarter. That's really all we want, just so there's a pulse. We don't want people coming to the BUIDL network and being like, oh no, we're not doing anything, And so I'm finding, and I'll be frank, it's just me right now, so I'm doing a lot of these things in parallel. So I'm auditing some of the groups, being like, hey, you haven't done anything, how can I help? Or hey, do you want to like transfer ownership, or do you want to leave, like whatever. So I'm trying to do a lot of these things. So if you go look at the BUIDL network, you'll probably see some that I haven't hosted in a while, and I apologize for that. But we only launched this maybe 4 months ago, so it's not too late. So that's one requirement. The other is, yes, we want inside every meetup page, the profile page, there's the sponsorship section, just saying that this meetup is proudly sponsored by Consensys, and we have some verbiage that says Consensys is sponsoring the BUIDL network and the blockchain ecosystem. And it's like inside the image of the Consensys logo. If you click it, it goes to the Consensys website. Those are the only 2 requirements. We don't require anyone to stay at every meetup. Thank you, Consensys, our holy father, for making this happen. Like, it's not like that at all. It's more we want to be recognized that, like, yeah, hey, we're here to help support it. But it's not about Consensys. Like, I want Consensys to almost take a backseat to like what this community is and what it can accomplish when things kind of start getting on the same wavelength. You know what I mean?
Thanks
yeah, I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, and I guess we'll keep a finger on the pulse and see how that goes.
Question.
Cool.
Hello, can I ask a question? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes.
Yeah. So if I understand correctly, the current, are you saying like once so if I have a meetup and I become the ambassador, all my meetups drinks are sponsored? Or is it more just like it's be listed in the Meetup Pro list, which you have there's a pro/BUIDL, there's a bunch of meetups.
So
immediate benefits.
Sure. That's usually the first 2 questions I get from people, like why would I join this? Why do I want to be part of this? Which are totally fair. Starting off with what you get, like right off the bat, people's meetup fees are covered, so those are gone. I'm working on additional budget, but I do have small budget for a yearly allotment of swag. So BUIDL ambassadors themselves will get a hoodie and a t-shirt that'll say, oh yeah, and this actually goes back to your question earlier, James, about like the branding, the swag you get. I want to create it kind of modular. So it actually won't even, right now it doesn't mention Consensys, all it says is BUIDL. I made it myself. I went to school for graphic design, so I created a very basic kind of like brand for BUIDL. And I'm actually working with our design team to kind of create like a modular BUIDL brand that people can kind of create and tweak and make their own. Because I don't want it to be like, this is now Consensys and it's the Consensys stamp like you'd see on the back of like a cow, you know, you brand them. Like, I don't want that. So I'm trying to create like a modular brand that people can kind of make their own in a way. So yeah, we'll send, and then we'll send stickers. That's one thing that we're going to send. And again, they're BUIDL stickers, but I had, I think it was someone in Manchester, our Manchester organizer. He actually was like tweaking it. Oh no, Honduras. He actually tweaked it to make it like BUIDL Honduras. I'm like, dude, send it. That's great. You like it? Like, I want people to feel like there's ownership over this. I don't want it to feel like it's mine or Consensys's. Like, that's not the point. But yeah, right off the bat, you get meetup fees covered, swag. I'm working on that summit that I mentioned to you, like the BUIDL Network Summit, where everyone kind of come together and meet people face to face. Unfortunately, we won't be able to fly people out for it, but once you're here, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner will be covered, and hopefully we'll have fun entertainment. Maybe Cardi B will show up, who knows?
Just to clarify, one of the requirements is to put the Consensys or BUIDL Network logo on the sponsor section of Meetup. But if I understand correctly, Meetup doesn't allow you to put any photos on the event description or event page. So does that mean the requirement, only place you can actually put is actually changing your, only image you can put is a logo of the Meetup? So what you are suggesting is to change the image to kind of watermark BUIDL Network or something?
I'll show you real quick. I'll do a quick screen share. So I just opened our Richmond, Virginia meetup page. So this is Richmond, Virginia, blockchain developers. They've been a part of the network for quite a while. They're doing a blockchain game upcoming event, which looks pretty sick, and Richmond's pretty close, so maybe I can scrounge together enough money to take an Amtrak train down there. But at the very bottom of the page, this is what I mean. So like, these are some other sponsors that they have, which is totally fine with me. And this is all it is. It just has a Consensys logo and says, actually, what does he have? Spearheading blockchain adoption and support of the Ethereum community. That works. I didn't even think I came up with that. That's totally fine. And then if you click this, it'll lead to the Consensys website. That's what I mean, the sponsorship area.
Thank you.
Yep.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
So if I'm currently hosting meetups right now and I joined this network, basically the biggest thing that would change for me is I don't have to pay for pizza by myself anymore. And I put a shout out to Consensys in the meetup pages.
I'm muted. So yes and no. The only two requirements are, yeah, you're hosting once a quarter meetups. That's totally fine. The content can be whatever you want it to be about. I don't even mind if you do things outside of Ethereum. Like, I think healthy debate is natural and organic, and I think it's still too early of a technology not to have these conversations. So it's not like you have to have events specifically Ethereum and Consensys backed and blah, blah, blah like that. I'm fine with it being open. So once a quarter meetups, putting it that little logo at the bottom of the page, the Consensys logo on the meetup page. Those are the only two requirements. As for budget for catering and budget for venues, I just don't have it right now. I'm hoping that as the network grows, I can show that this is valuable, and maybe having like case-by-case basis, like opportunities, like if you're hosting a larger conference, say for example, say like, hey, you know, we pulled together a pretty gnarly community here in XYZ city and XYZ country. There's gonna be about 1,000 people that are showing up, all regionally focused. Consensys could potentially sponsor that. Absolutely. I think those are conversations that will happen. But right now, I just, honestly, my hands are tied, and all I have is budget for is really owning or supporting the actual meetups, and then for the swag. That's really at a very base level what I have. And I think as the community grows and as it shows traction, I can be like, hey, look, it's doing well. Here's a quantitative number that's working. Here's a qualitative story of like how the network is supporting each other and supporting things that we're doing here. So once I can tell those stories, then I think I can scratch up some more budget. But right now, yeah, sadly, I don't have any budget for pizza or beer or any of that stuff. Yeah.
Those are my only expenses.
Like most, I know. And usually the two questions, and I was going to mention this, the two things that people ask right away are like, oh, Consensys can cover venue and catering. And I'm like, sadly, not yet. But the thing that I can support, and I'm trying to come up with systems for this, is content. I mean, we have Consensys members all around the planet that are active in communities, figuring out ways to plug in people that are regional into meetup groups that we're kind of supporting. And then also figuring out ways to kind of utilize the network itself to create content for the network itself. I think there's a lot of people that are like really smart and building really cool things. Our Madrid ambassador is actually a professor at a university, and he's been in this space for a while. Like he's really closely tied with EF. I think he's really closely tied with the EEA. So like he's a great example of someone like, I'm like, dude, we need to like put your knowledge into the network because like people are like scratching for it. So I'm actively trying to figure out ways to kind of make those things happen. But again, it's just me. So that's why I'm hoping I can get more I'm looking at all the people out here. I'm like, why can't you guys help me with this? But they're all busy. So yeah, I hope that helps answer your question a little bit.
Yeah, I was gonna, when you're mentioning content there, like there's obviously, yeah, different communities, especially on the education front, are developing their own content. And I'm just making sure my sound's still working. You guys can hear me still? Yeah. That people are creating their own content. So that's existing. At last year's Ethereum Magicians Meetup, a few developers got together and we started pooling content. So there is a bit of resources around, probably not so organized or not so consistent. Is that something sort of the BUIDL Network's looking to sort of bring under one umbrella and sort of brand as BUIDL/Consensys, or is it like you might be supporting different educators building their own independent content, not branded?
Totally, yeah. I haven't thought about that. So the one thing that I'm trying to create right now is like a library of downloadable content, basically like professionally templatized slide decks that people can create cool decks for information. Some of it I want it to be already pre-built, like Ethereum 101, Blockchain 101, Plasma, you know, all this kind of like really interesting things that folks would find of interest. And then also like figuring out ways, kind of like and I really like your community for this example. Like I feel like you guys are really focused on like, I'm going to say the business of events, like, because there's a lot of shit you have to think about outside of Ethereum, outside of crypto, outside of blockchain, that to put on a really fantastic event, right? And I think that that's something that the network needs in and of itself as well. Like I just onboarded our Phoenix ambassador, who is like very technical, like very smart guy, but doesn't really know the first thing about hosting and owning and promoting an event. So like, there's also like that kind of category. So like right now I've been thinking mostly about this library of downloadable content for folks that are like that, like how to put on a good event, how to here's a professional slide deck template that you can use whatever you want to do with. But I also want to start to do like that other library of downloadable content, like really like webinars that have been pre-built, special fireside chats with Joe, that you could actually show at events and then like talk about, or things like that. I don't know if that helps kind of like see where like my mind's headed towards, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so at that stage there wouldn't be any requirements of branding, but maybe down the line there would be if it's funded by Consensys.
What do you mean like requirements of branding?
Like on the slides you'd have to put a Consensys logo or somewhere to say like powered by Consensys or sponsored by BUIDL, or I mean, I guess if it were built, yeah, if it were built by BUIDL, like if it was funded to say, hey, you person develop this content, yeah, I could totally understand because it's built by it. But if it's content that existed that then wants to get incorporated under BUIDL, I mean, at this stage, I wouldn't presume you'd insist upon a logo, but down the line, would that become a requirement, do you think?
I don't know. I think it's something that I would open it up to the community and see if they're comfortable with. I mean, like anywhere that people feel comfortable, like putting like a Consensys logo or like a BUIDL network, like link, or something like that, like I'm obviously open to. But if it ever gets, like for me personally, if it ever gets to the point where it's like, I just don't like having this Consensys logo on top of some graph showing something that's of value, like, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with that. And honestly, I haven't even thought that far down the road right now. Like I'm just focused on like trying to build the pipes. And like once those pipes are built, figuring out a way to make this like kind of self-organizing and self-managed. So it's almost like I'm kind of someone that just can help support the network and put out fires when needed, and let people kind of create and do what they want themselves, and making it kind of like what I mentioned about the branding, making it very modular, making it so people can kind of like create their own systems at a certain point. I'm definitely not there yet, and I'm definitely not at that point where you're thinking, but those are all good things to think about for sure.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, sorry, go on. I was just going to have one final word, which is just to say, yeah, the stairway to hell is paved with good intentions, but I'll leave it at that.
Just hopefully final question. It's actually a question to both Consensys and MakerDAO, but you guys are kind of doing similar thing. Are they mutually exclusive? I.e., can we, as a meetup organizer, can we apply for both? And you guys are not in a situation like, oh, you are, or yeah.
For me, you can do, and like it's pretty, and what's the word I'm looking for? It can be anarchy. I'm fine with anarchy. I think anarchy is like a healthy part of blockchain, honestly, and crypto. So like if you want to be a part of a bunch of different like ambassador programs, if you want to be apply to a bunch of different grants, like the MakerDAO micro grant program, Consensys has a grant program, Gitcoin, which is one of the spokes inside of Consensys, has a grant program. Like I'm fine with all of it. Like I think anything, for me at the end of the day, it's figuring out a way to kind of support community organizers and support the community at large to kind of build and do really cool shit, which is really, that's why I have BUIDL, like the definition of BUIDL at the top of the website, because that's what this is about. It's about building and doing cool shit, right? So I'm open to it, let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. I've got also just one question. I remember in the brief chat that we had before this, you mentioned Discord, and what I found quite interesting was your vision around also connecting with the actual meetup attendees, so not just the organizers. And I see a lot of synergies between what we're doing and what you're doing and connecting organizers, and there's a lot of interesting stuff happening with that. But one thing we haven't really thought at all about is, what happens once you connect attendees, and I just was wondering what your thoughts are around that. Medium term, long term.
Totally. Right now, like the Discord channel is a bit of a soft launch. Like I wanted to see how many people bought into it, how many people were, like I was sending out the message saying like, hey, Telegram is great, but it's like a stream of consciousness and you can lose conversations pretty quickly. So like having like tailored sections where people can kind of talk, and I was talking about discourse as well, but discourse is more long form, I would say. So right now I'm kind of experimenting and did a soft launch for internally just for the event organizers to see if it's working. And I think it could be a potential positive. It's just so easy to onboard into Discord, right? Like Slack, you have to set up an account and blah, 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 and it's kind of annoying. Whereas Discord, you send a link and you're in, which I think is great. And I think there's kind of like a little bit of a crypto culture built into Discord. It almost feels like a little bit more like developer friendly in a way. So yeah.
My question, actually, I'm more interested about the vision around, like connecting with those people. The platform is one thing, and that's again like logistics, but like, what do you think can be gained from that? Like, what amazing things can happen?
Sure. So short term, it's soft launch ambassadors, and I think we're going to move forward to opening it up to meetup members. I still need to connect with like the ambassador committee to see how that works. I think long term, I think it's going to be a place where like conversations are happening around given subjects that kind of move things forward, whether it's a project, whether it's a program, whether it's a bounty, whether it's a Gitcoin challenge, whatever it might be. I feel like having these like tailored conversations around given subject matter is the only way you can kind of gain consensus and move things forward, right? And I think you need some form of platform, something where people can kind of come together and talk about those one or two given subjects, come to a consensus, and then move forward. And that's what I'm looking at Discord to become. I'm hoping it becomes that, because right now I think it's the most beneficial to the network. It's a way that everyone can get involved, and it's not just the organizers. Like it can be the members, it can be the organizers, it can be different backgrounds and investors to developers to entrepreneurs to like all the different kind of people that are involved in blockchain. I look at it as a really positive thing, but it's still very early days again. Like I only pushed this out like a month ago or less than that even.
Awesome. Cool. Interesting thought.
Hey, really quick, I gotta hop off this call to another call, but I realized that I was not paying attention at a certain moment that Makoto asked me the question about exclusivity. So we're totally cool with providing partial grants to cover meetup costs if you have other sponsors already sponsoring you. In the meetup form, we just ask that you disclose it. Yeah, that's it. But we're totally cool with multiple sponsors for events. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you. By the way, I learned so much at this meeting. So thank you all, especially you, Adam and James. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Take care, guys.
Thanks for being here, David.
Cheers.
That also does mark the end of our official time. So if there are any questions, maybe Adam and James are happy to stay behind. Otherwise, you're obviously welcome to drop off. Thank you so much, James and Adam, for like just bringing forward your knowledge. And yeah, also feel free to keep the conversation going in the Telegram.
Cool. Thanks for having me, guys.
No worries. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Cool.
Seems like no more questions.
Yeah. I think we'll hop off here.
Cool. Thanks again.
James, have a good day, I think, right?
Cheers. Have a good night. Ciao.
Awesome. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, guys. Thank you for the call. Bye.
Cheers, Pascal.
Bye.